California fires burn out of control, and people are starting to look at the state and the blackouts and all the problems and say, what is going on? We'll get into that, and plus the latest on the Vindman testimony in closed-door session, what really happened there. Epstein's suicide, some new questions, and also, when should bosses just get out of the way? That and more coming up on the Buck Sexton Show. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. A lot to get to today. We'll have more on the process of Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff trying to do an impeachment behind closed doors where there's no transparency. Man, I have so many things I want to hit today. I'm not even sure we'll get to them all. Free college in New Mexico, paid for by oil, though. That could be a problem. Almost 80,000 unaccompanied minor children showed up at the border so far this, I believe it's this past fiscal year. And were there efforts to change the transcript of the phone call between President Zelensky and President Trump? We have, is questioning Lieutenant Colonel Vindman unpatriotic? We'll get into that and so much more. I wanted to start, though, with a question that I posed to our guest yesterday, Tiana, the esteemed Tiana Lowe of the Washington Examiner. She's a California native. And perhaps we'll get Victor Davis Hanson, one of my favorite living authors, Victor Davis Hanson, to come on and join us, because he has always had some very worthwhile thoughts about just what the heck is going on in California. Where is the political backlash to problems that now are just blaringly obvious, that are just staring everyone in the face? And I wanted to start, let's review some of what's going on there. You right now have fires that are even threatening the Reagan Library, fires burning out of control. If the winds get bad, you could see hundreds and hundreds of homes, perhaps. Who knows how many millions and millions of dollars of damage done, people losing all their personal belongings, and of course, most importantly, most urgently, the possibility of people in harm's way, as these fires can burn very fast, very quickly, change direction, and you can be caught in a place where there's just no way to help. There's no one who can get to you in time. You have these fires, then you also have the blackouts. And the fires and the blackouts are related. Now keep in mind, this is not just a state. California is the 5th largest economy in the world by itself. And because of the political monoculture that exists there, it is largely now a standard bearer of unfettered liberalism, progressivism without any speed bumps or brakes put on it. Just go all in progressive. Very high taxes, tremendous regulation, left-wing special interests dictating policy. Now, you have the problem of the blackouts tied to the fires, because the blackouts that are currently affecting almost 40 million, or could affect up to 40 million people in the state of California, are a result of concerns over the fires. Why do you have fires in California like this? And by the way, the fires are more devastating in recent years than they have been in the past. People want to point to climate change, but in fact, there were more fires overall earlier in history, if you look at the data on this. So it's not that there are more fires, but fires have become more devastating. Why is that? They will tell us it's because of climate change. They're just pointing to the thing that makes them happiest as an answer. It's much more likely that the natural state that many of the environmentalist groups in California insist on for the forested areas, meaning leave all the dead brush, leave all the stuff there, don't do any controlled burns, and don't do any active forestry management, just let everything pile up, that then results in much more devastating, fast-burning fires in many areas of the state. And then you also have the blackouts that have come down. Now, PG&E, which is the major utility company involved here, has insisted on voluntary blackouts, at least voluntary from the perspective of the company does not have to do this thing, but is doing it because they don't want liability for fires that are caused by downed power lines. All right, so when there are fires going on, They're concerned about being blamed for fires that result from a downed power line. Obviously, if the fire stretches and hits some of the power lines, or if winds pick up, which is a concern about the fire, there's all these different components of risk for PG&E. And so what do? They say, fine, we're just going to turn off the power. Now, this is something that you generally associate with a third world country. Having been in countries where in the middle of the day, all of a sudden all the lights go out, all the computers go blank, the air conditioning shuts off, if they have air conditioning. You say to yourself, well, what just happened? Oh, just, a blackout. It'll be on hopefully in an hour or two. And everyone just kind of goes, okay. I don't think the people of California should get used to that. I don't think that they should accept this as the future, as the status quo. But I do wonder, when will they wake up to what's really going on here? When will they recognize that, first of all, less than 10% of fires are started by of these major forest fires are started by downed electrical lines, and all the judgments that are being made right now by PG&E are very much affected by the hyper-regulatory environment that insists on, by the way, having the power company extend their networks to housing developments in what are considered very high fire risk areas, even though the power company is like, well, that's going to be bad for us, because what happens if there's a fire caused by a down power line in that high risk area? Oh, you're going to be held responsible. In fact, the state of California holds the power company responsible regardless of negligence. So they're trying to provide power. Oh, something bad happens. Power company's responsible now. And this is part of the litigious anti-corporate attitude, even though it's a utility company, not really technically it's not really a private corporation the same way, but some big, deep-pocketed corporate entity has to pay when bad things happen to people. This is another liberal idea, although sometimes it crosses party lines. California is a one-party government, folks. So when we look at the exploding homeless population on the streets of California cities, when we look at the terrible water management issues where they've had, stretching back for years now, concerns about drought and what are we going to do, California as a piece of land, as a piece of territory, should be paradise, basically. It's incredibly rich in natural resources. You have an amazingly hospitable natural climate there for agriculture, obviously for growing of wine up in Napa and Sonoma, as well as other places in the state of California. There's oil in California. There's just tremendous natural resources in California, but they've been mismanaged horribly by those who are blinded by ideology. And now we get into the so what happens? Now there's the flow from California of families, especially young working families, that are saying, we're done with this. We're going to Nevada. We're going to Texas. We're going to North Carolina, perhaps Tennessee. I don't know. But they're just leaving places in California because they can't take it anymore. The Golden State is no longer golden for them. They've had enough. And now that part of your mind that thinks about the federalist system that we have and the experiments of government in all the individual states, there should be a little bit of a light going off there. When will people learn the lesson? Oh, but they'll tell us California is so wealthy. Look at how wealthy it is. Look at how many people live there. Well, a lot of people live there because they've been born into this state that is getting, over time, increasingly poorly managed. But there are also enormous concentrations of wealth in Silicon Valley and in Hollywood. Those are the two big ones that you generally think of. But remember, those are now appealing to a global marketplace. They're not just local company towns. They're not really responsible for the state of California. They pay high taxes, although they have armies of accountants and try to avoid taxation as much as possible. And there's a lot of ways that corporatism and big government go hand in hand, go together. But you'll notice that progressives have not yet figured out, they haven't yet connected the dots here as to why are all these things happening in this state. How is it that the same state that is home to the most wealthy technology corporations in the world. Well, I mean, I guess Amazon's technically not California-based, but Google and Facebook and YouTube, well, all of them, right? YouTube's owned by Google. All these different companies that are based out there. That's the same state now that has blackouts for millions of people when there's a fire going somewhere in the state. That seems to be a warning sign, doesn't it? But here's the problem. Progressives can live off the so-called, can live off the fat of the land for a while. They can take what they can, and it over the period of time that they are running an economy, in this case a state economy, into the ground, they will always come up with new excuses as to why this is happening. You also have, in that progressive stronghold on the left coast, the wealth inequality that is looking like a third world country while they're pretending to be doing so much to help working people. At some point, there may come a moment of recognition, I would hope, for the people of California and for the entire. Every time I say that, I think of the people of California with not Donald Trump, with Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger took on the public sector unions that are politically unbeatable in the state, and they just crushed him. And that was after they had the recall of that governor. So politics has been largely dysfunctional there because it's a one-party state. But progressives never learned the lesson, you see. That's what you really have to take away from this. They don't see cause and effect. They just come up with theories. Oh, it's climate change. Oh, it's because the rich aren't paying their fair share. It's always a slogan. It's never rooted in cause and effect, the reality of what's really happening day to day. What decisions are made and what are the consequences of those decisions, especially by the state government. These things take time, right? It takes time to ruin a city, as we see here in New York with Mayor de Blasio. It takes time to ruin a state. The problem with waiting until all the results are in is really twofold. One is then things are ruined. And two, they won't even take responsibility once they've destroyed the thing that you've been warning them all along they were destroying. That's really part of the lesson of mismanagement in California, in many major cities that are Democrat strongholds, whether it's Detroit or Chicago or Baltimore. It's never the fault of the people in charge, you see. There's always external factors. It's almost like the Venezuela playbook here. Well, it's not that the Maduro regime and before the Chavez regime turned a generally well-off South American country into an impoverished, anarchic wasteland. It's the Yankee Americans were the ones that ruined this country. If you talk about Chicago, you talk about Baltimore, you talk about the whole state of California now. It can't be the Democrat Party. It can't be the policies of the left, which make people feel good and can sound good, but in practice are disastrous. Whether it's water management, forestry, dealing with fires, management of utility companies, economic inequality, all these different areas where California is just a disaster. They don't learn the lesson, which is one of the reasons why we can't just allow them to play out their experiment. We have to try and come up with a counter-argument, come up with an alternative that people will believe in enough to take power out of the hands of the left-wing ideologues, the central planners of progressivism, and give it to people who know what the heck they're doing and will govern based on not just the will of the people as they see it, but on the results of their policies. They can tell us all day about how terrible Trump is. Look at how the country's doing. Trump's the president. Look at how California's doing. Democrats run the whole state. I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say, my friends. But don't expect them to learn that lesson anytime soon. There's always a ready excuse when you're talking about leftists, no matter how much they destroy what should be a great state, a great place. And that's what they're doing right now.
The president's done a lot of work to strengthen the alliances that perhaps were neglected in the previous administration. And what we found is that by working with our partners and our allies throughout the world, we're able to create better burden sharing, and we're able to find ways to hopefully resolve some of the more difficult situations in the world without escalating them. And so, again, all the things that the people were saying who were against the president last time were saying would happen that were bad if the president won haven't happened. And then, the next morning the sun rose, and the next evening the sun set, and America's gotten more and more prosperous. And I think people really like what the president's doing.
The last part people would argue with, but the part right before it, and that was Jared Kushner, by the way. We don't hear very much from Jared. But America is getting more and more prosperous. Things are going well. I like to judge a politician by the results of policies and by what happens in the aftermath of their decisions, not by what the media tells me needs to happen. There's all these conversations that can be had about healthcare, about the border, about the economy, about trade with China. These are issues that matter. But instead, what you have on the left is this obsession with just trying to come up with some excuse to impeach the president when we know they're going to impeach him no matter what they find, no matter what the excuse. It doesn't matter. It's all just a ruse. It's a sham. It's a scam. Who told you? I told you, I'm not the only one, that the Russia collusion thing was a joke. And then it all happened. We went through this investigation. And yeah, guess what? I was right. I'm telling you again, this whole Ukraine thing is ridiculous. We already have the transcript. And now they're saying, oh, maybe there were changes need to be made to the transcript. But in case you don't know really just how worthwhile and brilliant the mainstream media is, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace, Republican administration official, by the way, under the Bush administration, she's one of those. Here's what she said about a Fox News conversation dealing with Alexander Vindman, who's the one who testified recently about Ukraine. Play 23.
Here we have a U.S. national security official who is advising Ukraine while working inside the White House, apparently against the president's interest, and usually they spoke in English. Isn't that kind of an interesting angle on this story?
I find that astounding, and some people might call that espionage.
Except those people aren't chicken shit like the three of you, and they know that he passed a background check that the president's daughter and son-in-law didn't. Joining our
what I think you said?
I don't know. Joining our conversation.
That's right, Nicole. You heard that in the beginning. It was Laura Ingraham and then John Yoo talking on Fox News. But then Nicole Wallace comes in to say that they are chicken bleep. That's the kind of astute analysis, the kind of adult conversation you can expect over at MSNBC these days. When I tell you that Trump derangement syndrome is real, that it makes people crazy, that they can't make normal, rational decisions because of their hatred for Trump, I really mean that. It overrides other decision-making processes. The hatred of Trump becomes the primary motivation for anything and everything. But let's talk more about this congressional impeachment situation and Vindman and all the rest of it.
Adam Schiff, among many things, has been trying to claim that this is a fair process by saying that Republicans are allowed to ask questions. Now, he gets to choose all the witnesses, and him and himself only, which means it's not a fair process on the face. But even his claim now that Republicans can ask questions has been undermined because now he's directing witnesses not to answer questions that he doesn't want the witness to answer if they're asked by Republicans. He's not cut off one Democrat. He's not interrupted one Democrat and told a witness not to answer Democrat members' questions. But today he started telling the witness not to answer questions by certain Republicans. That reeks, and by the way, if you want to talk about a Soviet-style process, again, that might be what they do in the Soviet Union, not in the United States of America. We can't stand for this. The American people are being denied equal justice.
No, I applaud the Speaker for finally admitting it is a whole entire sham, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle. A due process starts at the beginning. It doesn't affirm a sham investigation all the way through. If you were in a legal term, it'd be the fruit from the poisonous tree. It'd be a mistrial. None of this information would go forward. But what's most important to the American public, we all have the phone call. We all have the transcript. We are all able to see there was no quid pro quo. The money was released. Ukraine did nothing and no action was taken. Where's the crime? Where's the impeachment? What's the impeachable offense? The American public sees that. We should move on, and they continue to try to move a whole sham organization. It's not going to work.
Well, we're not going to move on, that's for sure. The Democrats won't allow it. But let's talk about all of this. Yeah, the process, what's going on behind closed doors? What has Shifty Schiff been up to? Also, this former NSC staffer Vindman and his testimony and all the brouhaha over that. We've got our friend Sean Davis with us now. He is co-founder of The Federalist. Go to thefederalist.com for his latest. Sean, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man, let's start with the process. What was this yesterday about Schiff telling people? So he picks the witnesses, then he has the witnesses testifying behind closed doors, and then he tells the witnesses sometimes, don't answer that. How does this work?
Well, yeah, it's kind of amazing. I think the best analog would be to think of a criminal trial where the prosecutor is also the judge and also the jury. And in this example, the prosecutor can call whoever he wants, question whoever he wants, present whatever evidence he wants, but he won't allow the defense to call any witnesses, won't allow the defense to present or question evidence, and won't even allow the defense to cross-examine or ask questions of witnesses. I think calling this a Soviet-style show trial is probably unfair to Soviet show trials. And what happened yesterday was Vindman, this NSC staffer, was asked, hey, who did you share all this information with? Who did you share the transcript or readout information with? Who did you leak information to? And it was at that point that Schiff told him not to answer. That is just a shocking obstruction of what is supposed to be a fact-finding process here.
What do we know about where Nancy Pelosi is on all this? They have had some vote on, or there's a presentation of a process here. They've got a resolution. Where does the process stand for this impeachment inquiry, whatever they're calling it? I mean, can you just bring us up to speed on where this is right now?
Well, it's nowhere because this investigation they keep referencing is non-existent. And the reason I say that is because in the Constitution, the House of Representatives is vested with the authority to conduct impeachment. Now, a single member of Congress is not the House of Representatives. Leadership is not the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi is not the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is clearly what it states. It's the body as a whole. And that body has never, not a single time, authorized any of these types of investigations into Trump. And so the way the process works is when you don't have the entire House delegating specific authority to a specific committee, you are left with the authority of those various committees and their limited jurisdictions. So intelligence, they can look at intel activities. Appropriations, they can look at funding activities. Defense can look at the Defense Department. But what is happening instead is the Intel Committee, led by Adam Schiff, is doing things that are far outside of its jurisdiction, subpoenaing people that they have no authority to subpoena. And then you have Pelosi understanding that this is a sham process, one that's not authorized, and now facing a court challenge on that matter. She's trying to come and clean up the mess after the fact with this resolution, and it's put her in a real bind. She's having to rescue a scam-tainted process without actually authorizing a new real investigation, because that in itself would prove that the previous one was invalid. So she's got a real mess on her hands now.
Now, just for everybody listening, Sean worked in Congress. He was an investigator, for Senator Coburn?
Yes.
Senator Coburn. So he knows about these processes and how this stuff all goes on. He's been a part of all of that. Sean, what do you expect to happen next? It seems like at some level the Democrats don't even know. All they know is they want control of it and they want to be able to change it day to day to suit their needs. But do you have some sense of how their strategy is going to play out, what the timeline is they're working with here?
I'm not even sure they have a strategy at this point. I think what they were going with was fire, aim, and then ready. They're kind of the dog that caught the car at this point. Look, the Mueller investigation was a failure for them. Mueller's testimony blew up in their faces, and they've been searching ever since for an excuse to have an impeachment show trial. And so when Schiff and his team coordinated with this so-called whistleblower to cook all this up, they said, aha, well, this is it. And originally they said, we're going to impeach him by November. Well, I mean, it's going to be November in 2 days. We're going to impeach him by Thanksgiving. I don't think that's happening. We might do it by Christmas. I think they've lost control here. They realize that there's no there there, that the public's not with them. And so I think at this point what you're going to see is them trying to drag the process out as long as possible so that the process itself is punishment against Trump, that they can use it as this cloud over his head heading into the election. much like they used the 2-year-long Mueller investigation. The whole purpose of that was, maybe we'll get lucky and he'll get thrown out of office. But if not, we're going to paralyze him for 2 years. And they just decided in this process here, we might not get what we actually want, but we're going to paralyze him for a year heading into the election. It's purely political.
Is there going to be an impeachment vote in the House? I've always felt like they were going to impeach him no matter what, just because they really want to. It doesn't, even if it's bad politics for them for the election, I still think they're going to do it because they can't help themselves. Is there a future in which you see the Democrat majority House not vote to impeach the president, not present articles of impeachment against him on the House floor?
So I'm with you. Ever since the whole Mueller thing started, I said, their id is not going to allow them to not impeach him. They're going to impeach him for any reason or no reason. But as this process has dragged along, and as we've watched Pelosi refuse to even have a vote to authorize an actual impeachment investigation, I'm beginning to think they're concerned about their own politics here, because there's no procedural upside to them avoiding a vote, just allowing an investigation. So there must be some reason why they're not doing it. I can think of two. Either they don't have the votes at all, which I don't think is the case, or they know that making 30 or so swing district members walk the plank is political suicide for them. So if they can't even get to a vote authorizing an investigation, I'm not sure anymore they are ever going to get to a vote for impeachment. And I suspect we may drag into 2020 and into the Democrat primaries in Iowa and New Hampshire with them still having not resolved this, which will be an absolute disaster for them, given that I think half their members in the Senate are currently running for president.
Now let's talk about Vindman, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who I've been hearing so much about from the media. And it's the usual, how dare you question this military man, which reminds me of, how dare you question James Comey? And then we found out that he was the worst. And how dare you question Mueller? We found out that he was basically pulled out of like the retirement home in order to pretend to be running this investigation. Really seemed like he had no idea what was going on. What do you make of this story that Vindman now may have tried to change the transcript of the phone call between the president and Zelensky? What do you see here? What should we take away from that?
So I'll tell you, I'm amused by the theatrics and faux hysteria over any questioning of Vindman, given how we saw that these same people treated Michael Flynn, who was a very well-decorated combat officer, 3-star general. So I just can't take.
They called him a traitor routinely. Routinely called him a traitor.
Yeah. Sally Yates, said he had violated the Logan Act. I mean, come on. So these people are not serious. A huge part of their political operation is to shout down anyone who says or asks anything they don't like, just like Schiff did when Vindman was asked, "Who did you leak to yesterday?" I don't know what happened with him editing a transcript or not. I'll tell you, I'm skeptical of any leaks that are obviously coming from Schiff's office. The guy's a liar and a fabricator, and he can't be trusted. I will say that what concerns me most is, I'm very thankful for Vindman's service and the sacrifices he made in the armed services for us. But I'm extremely concerned about an active duty uniformed military officer going behind the president's back, trying to subvert his process, leaking to people, and taking part in what sure looks like an attempted coup against the commander-in-chief. I think that's really problematic when you have active duty military, you have intelligence service and security service operatives inside the House attempting to criminalize differing foreign policy views that the president, their commander, has. This is really, really dangerous stuff. And I worry that once you start going down this road, you can never actually go back.
And in terms of what we're supposed to believe from this, it seems to me that, okay, there's that leak about maybe he wanted to change the transcript. That to me is meant to undermine what a lot of us have come away from this thinking, which is, okay, we know what was said on the call. I don't care what somebody else thinks about what was said on the call, whether they liked it or I know what was said on the call. Therefore, I don't, this is just more opinions of people who clearly don't like and don't agree with the president on these issues or perhaps on any issue. So that to me is maybe just to get around that problem for them. But what, as of now, what exactly is the article of impeachment about this phone call supposed to say? What if there's not a crime, this is supposed to be what, abuse of power? I'm not even clear on what the line of attack is.
Well, look, the Washington Post, I believe the day Trump was inaugurated, said his impeachment begins now. So the real crime here is that Trump beat Hillary Clinton. That has always been the crime. It's unpardonable, and they will never forgive him for it. So the last 3 years has been a futile fishing expedition for maybe something that they can pretend is the real reason they want to get rid of Trump, when in reality the real reason is they want to get rid of him because he beat Hillary. Looking at that call, of course there's no crime in there. This is a president trying to enact his own foreign policy. And I'm sorry, when you go down into the chain of command in the military, it is not the job of an O5 detail to the White House to determine what is or is not allowed by the president in conducting the foreign policy. There's a reason we have civilian control of the military and civilian control of government in this country, and it's because the founders knew that civilians needed to be accountable to the people who elected them. So when you have uniformed military officers going in there, marching into these congressional rooms and saying, you know what, this guy's awful, he tried to do things that I didn't agree with, that's not how this country is run.
Do you think we're going to find out who the whistleblower is?
Well, I think Schiff is desperate to make sure that never happens. And I'll say, look, everyone in the media knows who it is. Everyone on the Democratic side knows who it is. Leaks were coming out about this long before it happened. In fact, the whistleblower was colluding with Schiff before ever filing the complaint. And it was interesting. Schiff, before all that came out, said, we've got to get him in here. We've got to get his testimony. He needs to come and testify. Most of us were like, yeah, absolutely. I want to know what this guy was up to. But as soon as it was revealed that Schiff was colluding with him secretly before the complaint was filed and that Schiff lied about it, Schiff did an immediate 180. And I'm not sure we've even heard about the guy ever since, which I find fascinating.
Sean Davis, everybody. Check out thefederalist.com. They're doing great work over there. Sean, always appreciate your perspective, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Buck.
They can't fix it. The process is broken. It's tainted. They have gone through this process where you have seen one side of the story. It's been an effort to get one side of facts and then to selectively leak those facts in order to taint the president.
The idea that we want to know who this individual may have communicated with, that's important information. And the idea that during our hour, our counsel is asking questions and Adam Schiff tells the witness not to answer our questions is completely ridiculous. And it's why this should be in public.
It's not possible to look at what's going on right now and come away from it thinking anything other than this is a another get Trump procedure from Democrats. Unless you are so deluded with anti-Trump sentiment that it's no longer possible for you to be objective. And I think, unfortunately, that's a widespread problem now. I think there are a lot of people out there who have been completely and utterly, their sanity on all issues of Trump has been taken away from them. They just can't find a way to step back and say, okay, what's really true here? What's really going on? I also believe that the American people must be getting very tired of this. The ones who hate Trump, you know, the 20 or 30% of the Democratic Party that, or maybe 20 to 30% of voters who are Democrats, they hate Trump so much that anything that is damaging for the president, it's like, you know, when the hamster hits the little pedal and gets to eat the little pellet or whatever, you know, they want more. They need more. They can't stop. And that's what CNN is set up to do, and MSNBC and New York Times and the Washington Post and many, many other places. They're all just trying to feed a brainwashed audience a steady diet of anti-Trumpism because that's what they think their audience wants to hear and read and see, and I think that's largely true. I can't imagine that most Americans care all that much about these shenanigans. I can't imagine anybody watches Adam Schiff give these press conferences where he just has this, you know, cold look in his eyes that is, well, the President of the United States clearly violated the Constitution, and he really looks like somebody out of, you know, like American Horror Story or something. He's a creepy guy. And there's no sense of decency or warmth or anything from him. Who votes for Adam Schiff? That's what I really want to know. Well, I just look and stare at the camera and my eyes don't blink. But I want to tell you that this president is the worst human being in the history of the planet. You're like, what is this guy doing? But we in the conservative media are forced to continue to cover his nonsense. because otherwise the charges just go unanswered. The allegations are able to just linger out there, and that's unfair to the president. This stuff is just, what a waste. What a waste of time it is for all involved, whether they realize it or not. But when you've decided that government power is something that must be in the hands of the left, it's intrinsic to your sense of well-being that you have libs with a lot of power to enact what you think is good for the country. I suppose then all the rest of one's judgment is tainted, and that's what we are seeing.